Having lost three of her five children, our next guest is no stranger to crippling grief, and yet she inspires others to not only find peace, but to experience a life filled with joy. Hi, and welcome to the U World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, transformational coaches, and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and spiritual entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible, leveraging podcasts and the huge audience we have over on the Gnostic TV network. Today, we are chatting with Marla Grant. Marla teaches people how to shift from the devastation of a grief event to a life filled with a sense of aliveness and joy. Most importantly, as an advanced grief recovery specialist, she can teach you the tools for life necessary to heal from any grief event. Having experienced her own journey of renewal after having three of her five children die and surviving a very difficult and often dangerous 27-year marriage, she is in a unique position to help others heal. Welcome to the show, Marla. It's really great to finally get a chance to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Jill. I really appreciate the opportunity. Any chance to help others is a good one.
I like that. So I'm going to ask you the one big question I ask everybody. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
That's a loaded question for today. Actually, I think the most important thing is it's really related to also dealing with grief, and it's to be in acceptance of what is happening around you, and to make sure that you are as you decide how you want to respond to things, make sure that you are being true to yourself and that you are, focusing on self-care. Self-care is really important. We want to make sure that we're in a place in our minds that's not chaotic and full of anxiety and stress, because when we're in the wiser part of our mind, because there's no wisdom in chaos. So if we're constantly in a state of anger or judgment, we can't tap into the part of our minds that has clear laser focused thinking and empathy and clarity and understanding how to communicate well. And to do that, you have to take time to just get centered. You can do that. I teach through positive intelligence. I teach several methods of doing that. But if you want to know just a short one, just sit down and you can even just listen to some calming music. But the idea is to be 100% focused on the physical, because that brings you into the present moment where you're not worrying about the past, you're not agonizing about the future, you're just present. And the present moment is where you'll find clarity and peace.
Yes. And yes, it's just being.
Yes, just being. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that's really hard, especially when you're in the throes of going through trauma or grief, because there's always the what if I had, or what will happen when, or the unknown. And I think it's really all fear laced, fear of
Oh,
loss, fear
yeah.
of the unknown, fear of what's going to happen next. So why don't we start out with, tell us your story, because yours is it's fundamental to the things that you're helping people with. So
Yeah, it really is. And as I begin, I want to be clear that I don't engage in what I call the grief Olympics. Yes, I have had an uncommon amount of loss. Three of my children passed, all at different ages, all from different things. And I know that that's a lot, but I never seek sympathy because I have a really clear understanding of, what this was meant for. And I am not a religious person, but I am very tapped into my spirituality, and that has helped. That has helped a lot. So let me just take you back to where it began. I was 23. My husband and I had moved to Australia. I childbirth was never going to be easy for me. I had a child in 1975, and I actually was given last rites because I got preeclampsia. And it was, so it was pretty serious. I was unconscious for 2 days. Fortunately, I lived through it. He lived through it. And he's now living here in the US, and we are very, very close. And I'm so happy for that. The following year, I got pregnant again. These were my baby bearing years, and I was all about it. So this baby happened to be breech. My pregnancy was fine, and the first child, by the way, was C-section. This baby, my doctor decided that she was going to let me have a trial labor. It didn't go well. Things went south at the last minute. It was not a public hospital, so emergency services were not available. And by the time she got there, I was already in full blown delivery mode. And in short, the oxygen was cut off from the baby, so he was perfectly healthy, but he did not survive the delivery. And I have to say, a lot of people think that when you lose an infant, either a miscarriage or a death like that, my baby died passed just after the delivery, that somehow it's less impactful than a child that you've known. And you will hear that. I heard that.
Oh,
And I want to mention this right now before I tell you about the other two, because it's so important. Grief doesn't have a timeline. There are no stages of grief. It's not a linear process. I buried that. I got pregnant just 12 weeks later with my third son, who was delivered healthy and happy, and he's still living. But I did not really grieve that baby until that was in 1975. In 2008, I was sitting in a class on death and dying. This is how long grief will last if you don't address it. And somebody in the class was talking about sort of minimizing that loss. And I spontaneously burst into tears, and I don't do that, certainly not in front of people. And it just all came out. And I said, "You have no idea. It was a crushing, massive loss. You go into the hospital 9 months pregnant. There's other women having their babies and leaving. Even to this day, I can't describe what a devastating, empty, vacant, disappointing feeling that was. I can
and
still,
your hormones.
oh yeah, all of
Even on
that.
top of that, I mean,
Oh yeah, it was beyond. It was, in its own way, it was every bit as devastating as my other losses. So I told you I had, oh, and I do want to mention this one other thing that is really important about that. So that was in 2008 where all that came out. Okay, so it's important to know that I never held that baby and I never saw the baby. So all these years, I've been not not in full nasty judgmental mode about the doctor and the nurse, but I did think it was unkind of them. I mean, I've been holding that inside me for a long time until about 2 months ago. My little sister, my youngest sister, who is a nurse, she asked me about the circumstances of the baby's death. I think I said I was overseas at the time. And she said to me, I told her, and it was a forceps delivery. It was just like the worst you can imagine, just a horrific natural delivery. And she said to me in the gentlest voice, she said, they did you a favor. Do you realize that? Because she said, your baby, you would not have wanted to see your baby. Because I
it was
know it's
probably so
physically,
mutilated
yeah,
just
yeah,
trying to get him
exactly.
out.
Yes, I know. I know that was the case. And I that was a life-changing moment for me to realize that. And all of a sudden, I felt this very deep compassion and empathy. I was just writing about it yesterday. This really deep compassion and empathy for those caregivers and how it must have impacted them. And now
Yeah.
I feel so much love for them and empathy for them, entirely different than I felt before. And I did not even see the baby where the baby was buried until I went to my son's wedding in Australia many, many years later with my youngest son. And he and I went to the cemetery where he had been buried in a sort of a common area for stillborn babies. So lots of poignancy around all of that. So anyway, fast forward in 1982, no, sorry, 1981, I became pregnant with my daughter, Nicole. And she was very healthy until she was about 7 years old, between 7 and 8. And we were living overseas in the Middle East at the time. And we found out she was probably had leukemia. So they sent us back to the US for diagnosis, and sure enough, she had an adult, very uncommon for a child to get it. She had an adult form of leukemia. So we came here and moved to the Tampa Bay area, and she received a bone marrow transplant from her brother, who was kind of the replacement baby, if I can call him that. Um, his name is Shane. He was her donor. And she had 6 very healthy years after that. She did really well. She was a lovely, buoyant, joyous child. And she had almost perfect health for those 6 years. And then suddenly, very unexpectedly, she relapsed with a different strain of leukemia, and she died within 6 months. Um, Now, after she had been born, I had her little brother, who was born in 1982, just 16 months later. And then I had my tubes tied so that, because I was like, okay, this is it. Um, and so they grew up together, and she was so tiny, a little waif of a thing, and he was very robust little boys. So everybody thought they were twins, and they were so close. They grew up together. They did everything together, walked to middle school together. And so um, he was quite, I realized years and years later how deeply he had been impacted by her loss. Of course, we talked about her all the time, and I asked him how he was, but I did not realize until many years later, very close to about 6 months probably before he died. He died when he was 31. He took his life. He died by suicide. We went up to see him. He lived in near DC, and his brother and we knew he was struggling, and we went up to see him. And both of us came away from our time with him after having very deep discussions, feeling like, we had talked about a lot of things that were important, but one, and that he would be okay. And it wasn't just his sister, but one of the things that did come out that I try to impress on parents, because it's important to know this if child loss involves siblings, is that the siblings will often not really tell their parents how they feel because they think that it's going to upset them, or it's going to all of a sudden remind them of their child. Well, I can tell you, there's not a moment of the day that we're not already thinking about our child. I mean, it doesn't mean we're,
They're your child too.
yeah, we're not, it's not that we're, I think of my children who passed just as much as I think of my children who are still here. So it's not a sad thing, but I had no idea it was keeping him from opening up about the depth of his grief. So I do believe that it contributed to his death, but he had some other sort of existential things going on unrelated to that I think impacted the last 6 months of his life, when he just kind of had kind of a mental breakdown. And I think he was really close to letting us know and asking for help. But, and like Jill, like you said, you know, I believe that before we come into this world, we do create these contracts with each other. And there is a purpose to why we're here, to have these experiences. And so I have never looked back on my life and said, why me? I probably more often said, why not me? Because all you have to do is turn the news on or go outside and you can see 100,000 things happening to people. So I'm not unique. So um, it was just a really, I can talk a little bit about how I arrived at acceptance if you'd like me to go into that.
I would like that, yeah.
So, so of course, when my first child died, it was just a shock. I just couldn't even believe it had happened. It was just so unexpected. I was really healthy and the baby was healthy. Everything was going well. So that was really unexpected. So I really turned towards what I teach people when I teach them the grief recovery method. We call them STIRBs, which is short for short-term energy relieving behaviors. And one of those, it's anything that you do to replace, to get out of your head about the loss and pretend it didn't happen. So for me, that was getting pregnant again. And because I got pregnant just 12 weeks after the baby died, I could focus on that. Now, I want to tell you a really quick, interesting story. And everybody out there, you need to know that you have the word alchemist in your title, so this will not be surprising. There's some woo-woo stuff in my life. Really interesting, but that baby's name, we named him Shane. I got pregnant 12 weeks later with a little boy. And we also named him Shane. And I knew the moment he was born that it was the soul of the same baby. I knew that. And many, many years later, a world-renowned evidential medium was giving me a reading. She brought Nicole and Ryan through, the older two, or the ones who were born later. And then she said to me, is there a twin? And I thought maybe I had not told her anything. And I thought maybe she was talking about the fact that Ryan had named his daughter Ryan Renee. And she said, no, no, that's not it. And so then I told her about the baby. And she said, that's why I can't read him over there because he's already back over here. And I was like, yes, I already knew that. So, so I got through that. And then of course, when Nicole died, I have to admit, I did for a time look around because she was such a lovely child, loving, joyful, funny. And there were some little girls that were sort of in her orbit that were not that way. And I remember thinking to myself, why would a child like Nicole die? And not that I wish this on anyone, but and somebody like that who's unkind and seems to have these anger issues. Of course, now I know much better. It's because children who are like that are wounded because of what's going on in their lives. Now I understand that. But at the time, I didn't. So that was going through my mind. But I had enough presence of mind to know I need to. I need to make something good of this. So I founded an organization, a nonprofit called Kickin' for Kids, and my older son Brennan and I did, and we did a whole bunch of activities. We raised about $250,000 and gave it away for research grants and helping send kids to cancer camp and pay for bone marrow testing. So and I ran that for many years. It was all volunteer. God bless all those people that helped me with that. And then eventually, not too long ago, we stopped that because I was turning my attention more to helping people with grief. So there was that. And then when Ryan passed, by that time, I'm like, what is going on here? One is unusual, two is like crazy, and three is just like, this just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Although I have worked with a woman who lost 4 children, all of her children. So
At the
anyway,
same time, I mean, I
yeah,
can understand if it happened at one time, like in a car accident or something like
yeah.
that,
Now
it
hers
would
all
be
were all different at all different times, all different causes.
just like,
It's very stunning. It's very stunning. So when that happens, you it it kept getting my attention. I'm like, what is this for? What is going on here? And I finally realized that that plus all the difficulties I'd had during my marriage that was going on during this time, which I might touch on that a little bit in here. I've never talked about that before, but I realized it just like came into my mind. That was the training ground for what you're supposed to do. And so I went into meditation one day and I had decided to start helping find a formal way to do that. And I was asked to open the Tampa Bay affiliate of Helping Parents Heal, which is now, I mean, at the time it was relatively small, but it's time now it's like international with about 30,000 members. Um, and so I did open this group. I think we grew to be the largest affiliate in the organization, regional affiliate. But before I started, I sat down and I was in meditation and I was asking my guides, what can I do to be as helpful as possible? And what I immediately got back was, I mean, and this is how I know it's not my own thoughts. The thought comes like that. It's like implanted immediately. And the answer was, you need to get really clear about what helped you get through your losses. And so immediately these three words fly into my head. And the first was personal responsibility, and the second was acceptance, and the third one was willingness. And I'm like, oh, those spell paw. So I made a graphic, which is on my website if you scroll all the way to
Mhm.
the bottom. And when I tell people about it, nobody ever forgets paw because, we all like visuals. So the personal responsibility piece means that we have to take responsibility for our own healing. Nobody can do that for us. Whether it's beginning to listen to podcasts like this where people talk about healing methods, whether it's watching videos or listening to speakers or reading books, whatever that is, doing your own daily practice, becoming mentally fit enough to draw yourself away from constantly thinking about the past and moving into acceptance. That's all part of responsibility, and also accepting your behavior in whatever transpired. Now, I'm not just talking about child loss here, any grief event, any relationship issues. It's all part of the same thing. And the second one is acceptance. And to me, that's always the key, because until we can accept that what happened was in the past and that it's just what is, and we're going to continually push back against that. And all of our struggles, all of our pain, all of our anxiety comes from not wanting to accept what's happened. So it doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you can't grieve. It means that, okay, this happened. And in the case of losing a loved one, you can find a different way to have a different kind of relationship with them. I absolutely have done that with my kids. And I've gotten signs from them. I talk to them all the time. I could show you, if I could bring my screen, I could show you some amazing things. Um, and the third one, of course, is willingness. And willingness is all about, after you've gotten to that acceptance place, you have to be willing to heal. And especially, I find this especially with some parents. I call this the mystique of child loss. It's this, and I don't mean that in an unkind way, but some people kind of can tend to wear that. Anytime we label something, we're in trouble. You give something a label, you can't move past it because you identify with that as who you are. It's not who you are. It's what happened in your life, but
And
it's
sometimes
definitely
people
not
get
who you are.
comfortable with the pain,
Yeah.
and they feel guilt if they don't feel that pain anymore. So they
Oh,
can't
oh,
move past it.
I've
They
heard
won't
that so
allow
many.
themselves to move past.
Yes, I've heard that so many times. I actually wrote some recent things down that I read, but one person said, I'm hanging on to my grief so that I can show my child I love them, or something very similar to that. That is very common, but it's so it's so detrimental to healing, and it's so not necessary, because this idea that you equate the depth of your grief to the depth of your love is just not true. There are many grief events that happen in life that do not involve love at all. You talk about children who are abused, who are neglected, who either emotionally or physically as children, or never know their parents. That's a form of grief all of it on. Betrayal is a form of grief. There's no love involved, reciprocal love involved in that. So we have to separate those two, and understand that our healing can absolutely happen, and our love never changes. It never changes. I do want to tell you a magic story about a big lesson I learned about that, but I want to read this quote. It's on my website, and it's about willingness. I just love this so much. It's by, I believe she's a therapist. Her name is Vienna Ferron. And she said, "Who are you if your story begins to change? Do not be so loyal to your suffering that your healing doesn't stand a chance." And that just says it in a nutshell for me. So I want to tell you about this very counterintuitive thing that happened that you would never guess would be a life-changing thing for me, but it was. Taught me a lot about the afterlife and just solidified everything I was learning to believe. I was at the funeral home. We had an open casket for Nicole's service, and I was there with my older son, and I had not seen her body since we left the hospital when she passed. And my son said, "Do you want to go up and see her?" And I said, "Bren, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. He took my arm and he said, "Come on, Mom." And we walked up to her casket, and I looked in her casket, and I was shocked. It took my breath away. I said, "Oh my God, that's not Nicole." And I kid you not, Joel, it was so clear to me. Her body, it just it just looked like a wax figure, or a pale statue. And it was so clear to me that it was just a container. And I could almost, I have goosebumps now, which tells me she's around listening to me. Um, I could I could almost hear her and feel her, because it's a scientific fact that energy doesn't just die. And
No,
she was such a vibrant, loving child that she lived on. I've heard from her many times. So yeah, that I would never have expected, such that what normally would seem like a painful moment. No, it was one of the best things I could have done. Yeah, nobody wants to see their child's, corpse, but it was a gift.
sometimes it is really healing. I've seen corpses. I didn't see my first corpse until I was much older,
Mhm.
but when I did see it, it was really obvious that the person isn't there anymore. It is just a container. It's the energy inside of us that lights us up,
Oh yeah,
that causes us to look and give a feeling when other
yeah,
people are around us, that just it's just a body.
yeah, yeah. We are all spirit beings. We are just in this body. Shakespeare said it best. I think it was in Macbeth. He talks about, we're all players on a stage. Everyone has their entrances and their exits.
Mhm.
And I so believe that, how are we going to play our part here? The script is written, but we have choice.
Mhm.
We can be this way, or we can be that way. And there's no judgment or condemnation. I mean, it's just like when we let our children go outside and play and interact with the world. They're going to make mistakes. Do we condemn them or punish them because they make a mistake? No, it's all part of learning and growing. And I feel the very same way about our lives. It just feels very obvious to me.
Yeah, we're just here to have an experience, and one of the One of my favorite quotes is plot twist. Things aren't going the way you want them to go. This is like,
Oh yeah. On the other hand, I've also seen some miraculous things happen that I never could have seen coming. Like, when I've finally given up and said, okay, please, I give up. I don't know what else to do. And then something magically will happen and that gets you out of a jam, or it's a major turning point in your life that you could not possibly have seen coming. And those are magic moments, I think. They're just amazing. So
yeah,
we need to believe in those too.
uh, or accept them as just, we might not be able to explain them, but we know
Exactly.
that they happen, and we don't have to justify them. They can just be.
Yes, that's a really good point. Yeah, I I always tell my clients, we need to drop this question, why? Why did this happen? The much better question to ask. We're never going to get an answer to that. And it's, even if we got an answer, it wouldn't satisfy us. We would say, well, why? Well, then why that? The better question to ask is what? What is this meant for? What am I supposed to learn from it? What am I supposed to do with it? What's the next step here? That's much more productive. And it also moves you into a place of being able to be accepting, and also take the next step, which is, whatever that action step might be.
And often getting into action helps us move past the pain because,
Yeah,
grief generally involves some sort of pain, emotional pain.
of course.
And when you're just sitting in that pain, it's really hard for it to get better. But when you recognize that there's something else you can be doing, even if it's like walking or shaking your body or just
Right.
movement,
Yes. And
allows your brain to shift enough to get you out of that.
it is. It is, and you're exactly right. Especially in the early stages of grief, the early, times after you've lost someone or gone through something difficult. It's just that act of putting one foot in front of the other. I mean, I don't want to minimize child loss. I hope it hasn't come across like that because I've gone through all this, but you know, it's just the small things. It's just being willing to get up in the morning and make yourself a cup of coffee. And I just want to circle back to your very, very first question, because you're talking now about doing things. You asked about what people can do right now. One of the most helpful things is we can do when we're going through grief, and let's make no mistake, we're going through a massive grief event right now, a, a collective grief event. And it doesn't matter what your politics are,
Yeah.
because it's impacting you, either because your beliefs are being shredded, or you are losing contact with people you care about because of your beliefs. And that can happen on both sides. So one of the most helpful things we can do is think about loving ways, not just for self-care, but how can I connect with somebody else? How can I make that person's life a little bit easier? And it's pretty easy to think of ways to do that. And listen, I'm talking about something as simple as holding a door open for someone. I did that. I wrote about this actually on Substack. I think I called it something about the ice cream store, a short story about love, and it was at the ice cream store. I had gotten my ice cream. I was I was really cranky when I got to the store. Was not happy with the way things were going, and it was beginning to. I realized all of a sudden it was making me cranky. It was making me project unloving, you know, mental, emotional vibrations out in the world, which I do not want to do. And I all of a sudden I felt bad. I just physically did not feel good. So I got my ice cream and I went to the door, excuse me, and I don't even know where this guy came from. I didn't even see him, but I I I thought I'm going to hold the door open for that guy. And it was not like he was right there ready to go out the door. I held it open for like 30 seconds. And it was an African American gentleman. And it was almost like this moment was meant to happen. He walked through the door and he looked at me. I mean, he really looked in my eyes and he said, "Thank you for your kindness." And in that moment, I knew that's who you need to be all the time. And people will respond. I invite you, if you're listening, try that. Try that anywhere you are. Just say something kind and loving to someone. It doesn't have to be fabricated. Be genuine. I mean,
Look
you'll
for
think of
reasons
something.
to be kind
Yeah.
and look for reasons to hold space for someone else. You
Exactly.
held space for that gentleman. It was physical space in that you held the door for him and you allowed him to progress at his own pace. You didn't hold the door open and you weren't tapping your foot. You just held the
No.
door open and allowed him to move through that space unencumbered. And he remarked to you about kindness, but it's the ability to hold space for other people. We can do it in our comments on people's posts.
Yeah.
People say things that trigger you all the time. No matter what your politics are, no matter what's going on in your life, you will get triggered by things people
For
say.
sure.
You don't have to respond in a way that is like fighting back. You can
Right.
just let them have the space to express themselves because they are also in pain. Something caused them to create that content that they created. And if
Yes.
you allow them the space to feel those feelings, and you can be kind to them. You might not have to agree with them, but you can be kind to them in that pain that they are obviously in rather than
Yes.
piling on and making them feel worse about it.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. And it's so odd that you did because I to my positive intelligence clients, I send biweekly, semi-weekly messages, and at the end of the one I sent yesterday, I said that very thing. I said, when we're tapped into what we call our sage mind, we are much more we drop the judgment and we're much more inclined to be discerning. Now, there's nothing wrong with looking at what's happening in the world and making a decision about how you feel about it and whether it's serving the greater good or not. There's nothing at all wrong about that. But what when we get into trouble is when we start judging people. We start saying you are this or that. You are or thinking malevolent thoughts. If this goes back to my belief that we are all from the same divine spark. We are all of the same stuff. We are all at different places in our learning, our spiritual learning, our spiritual growth. But we are all the very same at our core, our very essence. So I don't know what that person's gone through. So I said, you know, take a moment and do exactly what you just said. Just be curious, invoke that part of your mind, which is one of the powers of our sage mind, is to be curious about, I wonder what happened in that person's life when they were a child to make them so hateful, or what is happening in their life now that makes them feel disenfranchised and as if their needs are being neglected and everyone else's are being focused on. There's something going on there. We all react to life based on what's happened to us. That's all our survival. And you're right, you said this at the beginning, it's all fear-based survival. I won't people won't love me, or I won't physically survive, or it can be a million ways that we feel that we
Missing
will
out on
be.
this, or
Yeah.
I'm going to end up dead.
Yes. Yes. Or broke or whatever. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It doesn't take a lot, but it does take a conscious effort to be
Oh,
aware of other people and to be kind. My daughter, my youngest daughter, so one of her greatest desires or characteristics that she aspires to is kindness. And
oh,
she wants to be thought of as a kind human being. And she's verbalized this a lot in her life. She's like, I more than anything else, I want people to think of me as being kind. And so she goes
oh.
out of her way to be a kind human being, which is like I've learned
That
so much from her.
that that really resonates with me. It reminds me very much of Nicole. She was she was so like that. And in fact, on one of our many trips back from the hospital, she just spontaneously said to me, "You know, Mom, I think the reason we're all here is to help each other." And she was so like that. Yet she grew up with three brothers, so she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. And very clear thinker, very she was so wise beyond her years. She used to marvel at she did not suffer foolish behavior either. But she was a very, very kind person. So that's a lovely attribute.
I think of her as an old soul. I
Yeah.
think her soul is much older than mine. And I was 44 when she was born. So, I mean, I was like young when she came along.
Oh
And
yeah.
and she was just like she was a surprise. She was a girl. I wanted a daughter. I'd had three sons, an oldest daughter and then three sons, and I really wanted the last one to be a girl. And yeah, just like she's always been a gift. I've
Oh yeah.
always told her she was a gift, and
Yeah.
there was no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, they're wonderful. If we have time, I just want to touch a little bit on my marital relationship.
Mhm.
Only because it bears a lot of importance in the things that I've learned. And I want to stress before before I say this that there were many more gifts that came out of the stress in this relationship than the trials. The trials are largely over, even though in a odd twist of fate, I am his power of attorney. And he is in a facility because he was a lifelong alcoholic and with a sex addiction. And those do not go together very well on the receiving end. He was God bless him. He had a really, really difficult childhood. He did not ever learn how to emotionally regulate. And of course, all this created a lot of issues. I was very young and naive. I didn't know anything. Not only did I not have any answers when I got married, I didn't even know what the questions were. So
I
I
can relate to that so much.
seriously, I didn't. I was like, la 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 la, you know. But boy, I got a quick education, and he could be violent at times. I often worried about. I was not sure if what would happen. He did tell me he thought about killing me. So there was all this going on in the background. Of course, the children had problems with him. Um, but I say all this that you know I intentionally stayed. Well, part of the reason I stayed married was because we lived overseas, and my options for leaving with four children were difficult. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But things began to change when I got back to the States. We lived abroad for 15 years, and I could begin to take some kind of control after I got back here. But Nicole died shortly after we got back, and some other things happened. So I really in my mind, I knew in 1982 when Ryan was born. I looked 18 years into the future and I knew that when Ryan was able to leave home, that would be when I left my husband. So I knew I had all that time and I I kind of knew how to keep the ship afloat. It wasn't always easy. It was always sometimes dangerous and very uncomfortable and unpleasant at times. But Ryan was almost 18 when I left, and that period, the next couple of years was difficult. But I, you know, I was in I was in grief, not right away. After I divorced him, I left in 1999. I divorced him in 2000, and I was not immediately feeling much grief. But around the second year, I really went into a dark night of the soul because I thought I just gave up. I just gave 27 years of my life to that, and I do not have the emotional capacity to build another relationship because I know what that takes. And it felt like being in jail for so many years, and I've been single and extremely happy ever since. But in the meantime, I had a transfusion in Saudi Arabia when Nicole was born there, and I contracted Hep C. So I'm also thinking to myself, I'm mad because if I do have a sexual relationship with someone, I have to tell them. I'm like, this is so freaking unfair. So I was angry on so many levels. And then finally one day, I don't know. Listen, I feel like I know I came into this world with a ton of help there for me. So I was speaking to my guides and to my spirit helpers and God, and I said, look, if I have to go through all this shit, all I ask is that I please learn what I'm supposed to learn. And when I said that, everything changed. Everything changed. I started to learn, I started delving more into spirituality. I began to see patterns in my life. One thing led to the next. I was led to find this work, the grief recovery work I do, and then I was led to positive intelligence, which is sort of the next step I take people through. And it has been phenomenally healing both for me and for my clients. I mean, I've worked with people who were at rock bottom, and they just are flying now. They have, you know, their lives are full of hope and love and joy. And I'm not doing that. I'm a guide. That's all I am. I can't do the work for anybody, but I'm so full of admiration for them because they're so courageous. I'm like, it takes a lot of courage to do the work. And I've worked with men too who've said, "Man, I didn't know it was going to be this hard." I'm like, "Yeah, it's hard." You have to be radically honest with yourself. I could see I could see all the ways just 2 years ago, uh, in my late 60s, I learned one of the biggest lessons of my life having to do with why I was such a pleaser and how I am also a controller, and how those two things, we think we're you pleasers think they're just being nice. No, no. The truth about that is that part of us is trying to get something. And I did not even see that until I started doing positive intelligence and began to figure that out and do the work myself. And then I'm like, oh, so that's what's going on here. And the minute I did that, I was like, I got it now. But that's what all
It's
this
so
is.
freeing.
Yeah,
I want to address that because I struggle with that same thing. Like I really want people to like me, so I want to do all the things for them. But really, I want I just want to get it done. And I know how to get it done. And so I just want to do it for them to get it done, rather than to allow them to have the experience for themselves
yes.
or to ask them if they want help. It took me years. I was literally in my 60s when I figured this out. It's like, I don't,
I,
I know, right? You would think it would be obvious, but it just isn't because we're not told that stuff. We're
no,
just
I
told we're
feel
bossy. And so,
and,
you go
and
around all butthurt because people think you're bossy. Well, I have a gift and I can help people,
I
but,
know. I know.
sometimes people don't want to be helped.
That
And it took,
story is identical to what happened to me, and it happened with the gentleman that I was friends with. And I
Mhm.
did the same thing. I could see that he needed help with this because he wasn't very good at the errands of life. And so I inserted myself. And by the way, that can create feelings of resentment in other people. We think they should appreciate it, but it
but
can
they
actually,
don't.
because what you're doing is you're saying to them, you're not capable of this, or we're denying them exactly what you said, the opportunity to grow by having to be miserable in figuring it out. And I know he's fine without me, but what I was doing was the controller in me was stepping up and doing all this stuff because I'm good at that stuff. Sounds like the same thing with you. But I wasn't being just, altruistic. I knew that if those things were taken care of, he was in a better mood. He was in a happier place. And so we had a lot more fun together. But that was my own issue, my own insecurity about, well, what if he doesn't like me? What if he doesn't, what if this, what if that? And as soon as I figured that out, and I figured it out because one of the things I learned through positive intelligence was when somebody says something, just be quiet, and instead of formulating a response, like you said, you don't have to react to everything, just be quiet. And when I did that, I really listened to what he was saying. And then a certain incident had happened that made all this happen, come to light. But I realized, because I didn't respond and I listened, I'm like, oh shit, that's why he did what he did. Now, what he did was not reasonable, but I understood why he did it. And in that moment, I thought, girl, that was all you. And yet when he told me it was all me, I was like, what do you mean? You're the one that flew off the. Anyway, we learn so much from ourselves. We don't learn from life when it's easy.
Nope. It's
We
when
learn
it's
from life when
hard.
it beats us up. So let it beat you up and don't resist it. Just take the time to, make sure you
Be the
find a good
hero.
that can listen to you, or call me up. We'll have a 30-minute discovery call. Won't cost you anything. Um, yeah, it's one of the funny. It's just a funny thing about life.
If you get
There's
stuck in victimhood, it it can be you'll be stuck in misery. But if you
oh
can
yeah,
look at life like you're the hero of your own story and things are gonna happen to you because when you read a story, a really good story, there's lots of twists and turns. Things happen and they're cliffhangers. You,
yeah, and
you
it's
get
not an
to
interesting.
experience the cliffhangers in your own life.
Yeah, and it's not an interesting story if the hero doesn't have faults.
Right.
So no,
The
no one.
interesting part's how they're going to move through the tragedy in their life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So I know that you offer the 30-minute discovery call that you just mentioned, but you also offer an ebook about the 6 major myths about grief. You want to talk about that briefly for just a minute?
Yes, it's a great little ebook that just kind of gives you an overview of, if you've gone through a grief event, some of the things that happen are going to be familiar to you. Like, you might have run into people, for instance, who said that you should be over this by now. Okay, time doesn't. One of the myths is that time heals. Time doesn't heal anything. It may lessen the intensity of your grief, but it doesn't actually heal. And grief is cumulative, and it's cumulatively negative. So if you had something happen to you in your childhood and all your parents did was say, if you're going to cry, go to your room, that reinforces the idea that you're supposed to isolate, you're supposed to not share your grief. Whatever that was, you are being denied expression of your pain. and that is going to carry into your adult life, and you are going to expect that of others, and it's a repeating cycle. So it's about six of the sort of the major myths about grief that it goes through. It's just really very instructional, and it can make you feel less alone in what you're going through. I had a one of the moms I worked with. She actually lost her only child, a son, and she was a very positive person, and I knew she was going to do well right from the beginning. But someone at her work, only months into having lost her child, said to her, "Your son's been gone for a minute now. You need to get over it." And I know, we can hardly believe the cruelty but this comes from a place in people of their own fear of loss. Like people can't, they just don't want to know. They're uncomfortable. Now there's also, you know, we also kind of have to learn to have some empathy for people because they don't understand. They don't understand. Nobody can really understand what you're going through unless they've been through something similar. And even still, I never tell a parent or anyone I'm working with, yes, I know how you feel,
Yes, you know.
because I don't know how they feel. Their relationship with that person was unique, and that, even in a family where there are several family members and someone dies, that grief event is different for all of them
Mhm.
because they had various, levels of relationship with the person, wherever their own experience is. So, yeah, we go back to that label thing. Anytime we label ourselves, victims or I am this or I am that. So anyway, it's just a really good overview of some of the basic myths about it. And I will in time be adding some more ebooks to my website, which will be available as well.
And you want to tell people where they can find it and the name of your website.
Yes, my work is called Inspired Grief Recovery, past tense inspired. So if you go to inspiredgriefrecovery.com/event, uh, and click on that, and you will see the opportunity to sign up, and you'll get a free subscription to my Substack, and you can sign up for a free 30-minute call with me, and then you can also just click and download the ebook.
Um, And you're on Substack at marlagrant.substack.com.
Uh-huh.
And you're very active over there. And yeah, people can actually connect with you because I love
Oh, I'd love
Substack for
to.
that.
Yes, that's actually the reason that I am on Facebook with Inspired Grief Recovery, and I am on um, Instagram, but I stopped being quite as active there because I really wanted to interact with people. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to have a conversation, and I can facilitate that much greater on Substack. So, and I am hoping to begin a live, sort of intermittent. I don't know how often I'm going to do it, but I want people to there's so much anxiety and stress going on right now. I want people to have a place that they can come, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes. And I'll take them through some somatic exercises that can help them, first of all, recognize that they are in a state of, mild trauma or stress and anxiety. We don't often realize that, as you're listening to this, I would I would recommend that you just do a body scan. Just kind of check in with your body. Are your shoulders lifted a little bit? Are you feeling any anxiety in your chest? Is your jaw a little bit tight? We go through that all day long and never even realize it. So, yeah, I can give you some tips on, we'll just get relaxed together. Because if you're in the moment, if you're focused on your body or focused on something in the physical, you cannot both be in the present moment and also in your survivor brain, which is all about anxiety and stress. It's not possible. Physiologically, it's not possible.
And smile. Even if you don't think something's funny or you're not feeling like it, just smiling changes the physiology of your body.
Yes, and I want to just leave you with one free tip that's really helpful. Today, try this today. Instead of thinking about something that you did wrong, judging yourself for something you've done wrong, I want you to think about something that you've done right and high five yourself for it, or just like, I did awesome, or I accomplished that task that I have been putting off and putting off. Just something, or yes, I made that person smile. Or use that as a little tool today. See if you can make somebody smile. Bring joy to somebody else. I promise you, when you do that, it will lighten your own heart for sure.
Can't help but to just come back at you and make you feel better.
It does. It's just we're constantly putting out, we have what are called mirror neurons. And
Mhm.
you can tell when, you know this because you know when somebody comes in a room and they're bringing dark energy with it. You can feel that. And in the same way, though, you can also feel somebody who lights up a room. You are doing that when you're interacting with people. So what do you want to send out? I was listening to one of Sarah Faye's lives yesterday, and one of the speakers said, "Who do you want to be? Who do you want to portray yourself as online?" And just like your daughter said, "I want to be known for kindness." It does not mean that you're ignoring what's happening that needs attention. Doesn't mean that.
She's a third degree black belt in karate.
What's
Uh,
that?
she's a third degree black belt in karate. So she knows
Oh,
the
she knows that
defense.
other side. Yeah.
Yeah, she knows the other side, but she chooses kindness.
Oh, yeah. They are not
This is like,
mutually exclusive.
yeah.
I want to make that really clear. Being strong and courageous and doing the things that need to be done. I tell people love is an action verb. You know, it's not, it does not exclude that. It's almost what makes you powerful enough to be strong in your kindness.
Yes,
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm amazed at how much you and I have in common. Thank you so much for having me. Any chance I get to talk to people is a great thing. I give them hope
I've loved this.
for
So,
sure.
to learn more about Marla and to book a consultation with her or to get access to the 6 major myths about grief, please visit inspiredgriefrecovery.com, and we'll be sure to put the links in the show notes below. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you have a podcast or you're interested in starting one to get your message in front of our huge and active audience, be sure to reach out to us at jill@gnostictv.com. We love to help spiritual entrepreneurs and coaches amplify their voice and monetize their mission, and offer a variety of ways to do this on the Gnostic TV Network platform. Please join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today.